Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.
Continuing with the Gateless Barrier, Case 23, Huineng's Neither Good Nor Evil. The sixth ancestor was pursued by Ming, the head monk, as far as Daiyu Peak. The teacher, seeing Ming coming, laid the robe and bowl on a rock and said, "This robe represents the Dharma. There should be no fighting over it. You may take it back with you." Ming tried to lift it up, but it was as immovable as a mountain. Shivering and trembling, he said, "I came for the Dharma, not for the robe. I beg you, lay brother, please open the way for me." The teacher said, "Don't think good, don't think evil. At this very moment, what is the original face of Ming, the head monk?" In that instant, Ming had a great awakening. Sweat ran from his entire body. In tears, he made his bows, saying, "Besides these secret words and secret meanings, is there anything of further significance?" The teacher said, "What I have just conveyed to you is not secret. If you reflect on your own face, whatever is secret will be right there with you." Ming said, "Though I practiced at Huineng with the assembly, I could not truly realize my original face. Now, thanks to your pointed instruction, I am like someone who drinks water and knows for himself whether it is cold or warm. Lay brother, you are now my teacher." The teacher said, "If you can say that, then let us both call Huineng our teacher. Maintain your realization carefully." Wumen says, "It must be said that the sixth ancestor forgets himself completely in taking action here. He's like a kindly grandmother who peels a fresh lychee, removes the seed, and puts it into your mouth. Then you only need to swallow it down." Wumen's verse says, "It can't be described, it can't be pictured, it can't be praised enough. Stop groping for it. The original face has nowhere to hide. When the world is destroyed, it is not destroyed." It's a hot one today. Just before I get going, I want to just ask maybe the Shoji, we can set up the smallest table just over by the door with some cups and tape and just a jug of water so that people can have easy access to water during kinhyans or during the work period, because it's hot and we sweat a lot and it causes problems. So be careful. Sasaki Roshi used to always say in hot days, he'd say, "So hot a dog can't swallow it." I remember when I was younger, whenever I say when I was young, people give me trouble. They say, "You're still young." So when I was younger and I was training at Mount Baldy, I was always a really enthusiastic student and did a lot of sessions and was really eager. And when it was finally time for me to be ordained, I remember getting really excited and they said, "Oh, you can just get your robes made and sent." And I was like, "No, I want to do it the traditional way." So I sewed all my own robes and everything like this. And I grew up in Ontario, and I had lived in BC here in Victoria since 1995. I was ordained in 1999. And for some reason, I mean, still to this day sometimes when I think of myself, I kind of think like I'm a Canadian. And generally when I think of myself as a Canadian, I think of myself as a sort of Eastern Canadian. So when it came to sewing robes, the robes I sewed, like I had, usually in our tradition, we have a set of winter robes and a set of summer robes. And so the winter robes that I sewed were like a heavy denim. And the kesa, this piece here that I sewed, was like it's like almost a suit wool. Whenever I hand it to someone, I think Doshu borrowed it from me a couple weeks ago, and you hand it to someone, and they go, "Pull." So anyway, I was ordained in January of 1999, and was really, you're ordained sort of on the last day of sesshin, basically. Just after the last day of sesshin, there's usually an ordination and then a meal. So it was a winter sesshin at Mount Baldy. It was cold. And then when I came back to Canada, the Zen Center was really small then, and so I never wore my kesa in Victoria because it was completely overboard to, have this, sit and have the bells ring and then I stand up and put on my big. It was a bit too much, so I never really wore it. And then the next time I went down to Mount Baldy was June or July of 2000. Maybe it was earlier than that. Anyways, the next time I went down to Mount Baldy, it wasn't winter anymore. It was summer. And so I remember very clearly the first morning being there, getting it was coolish in the morning on the mountain, and then putting on my kesa over my summer koromo, which the summer koromo that I made was I was like, well, I'm a Canadian and an Eastern Canadian, so things are cooler, so I need a bit more of a... So I had this thinner but still sort of cotton koromo, this robe here. So I get myself all geared up and have my summer koromo on, and I put my big fat wool kesa on. And this is a sort of Mount Baldy's in the sort of last ridge of mountains before the Mojave Desert. So it's warm there, even in spring or early summer. So you go down to the Sutra Hall, and you're there during sesshin with 30 or 40 or 50, sometimes 60 people back then. And so you're in the chanting hall, and you're chanting away, and the temperature's sort of climbing, and I'm starting to go holy God, this is 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm already dying here. So then we finish the chanting, and we come back to the zendo and sit down and start doing the day's sesshin. And before 11 o'clock in the morning or so, it's 100 degrees or more. And so I'm sitting there in my koromo and all my monk's robes, and in our tradition we have a novice has this big fat sort of cotton, some monks I know call it the black intestine. It's like a big belt, and it's like a is like a quilt kind of actually. So it sits there on your, and I'm sitting there and I'm going like, holy shit, this is so hot. And I look over and there's a layperson in lay robes, and I'm going, why did I do that? Like, what, sign me up for more heat. So today I was down in the interview room and putting on my kesa, and this particular case came up, and it's talking about the inability, the weight of the inability to pick it up or to carry it, and it reminded me of the heat of the robe. This sort of, people often come up to me in the summer if I'm downtown in robes, and they say, "Why do you wear those things? Why don't you guys pick another color? Or, maybe you should get some Gore-Tex or Thinsulate or something that's going to be a little more breathable," and all this kind of stuff. And the thing about those considerations is that there is, metaphorically speaking, the robes have weight, and when you put on robes, there is an added heat, both literally and metaphorically. And this is just something, particularly for those people who are coming up to Jukai or becoming an elder. I'm definitely. I was going to say definitely when I was a younger person, but I think that always, no matter how old we are, no matter how much practice we have, there are always mixed motivations. Our motivations are never totally clear, at least not in my experience. They're not totally pure and clean. Certainly when I was ordained, part of the motivation was really wanting to become clearer in the Dharma. And I viewed ordination as a way or a path towards greater clarity in the Dharma. But absolutely, if I'm being honest, I think there was a part of it was like, you get a Dharma name and you get some cool robes, and it's you get a different status because it's like you're a monk now, and there's it's a hierarchical system, and a lot of it is based on your ordination time and how long you've been in. And so I think that anybody says like, no, I had no consideration of that whatsoever, I think that's a lie. I think that it can be minimal. I think that it can be the lesser of your motivations. But I think that for all of us, it's very human, I think, to have consideration for your position in a society or in a culture, your rank. And I think that if you're motivated by this, Buddhism is a great place to go, because the reality is, at least in my experience, that what happens is that you put out a whole shitload of effort, and you sweat a lot, and you sit a lot, and you get sore knees and sore backs and all this kind of stuff. And you get this cool Dharma name, and shave your head and become a monk or become an Osho. And the reality is, shortly afterwards, you start to go, what? Like, really? I gave up weeks of my life to sit and look at the floor, and it's like all I got was this bad haircut, And I think that if that's your motivation, it falls away. And I've seen a lot of people actually come into Zen practice, a lot of people come into Zen practice, and they start with a desire for recognition or the Dharma name or rank, essentially, a position, a place. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that human beings, one of our desires is really feeling like we belong, or that we have a place. But it's not an end, I don't think, and I think that that's really the challenge for a lot of people. In Zenwest, we have a really clear sort of system, and we say, if you want to come and sit in our Zendo on Sunday, you've got to do the orientation course. And if you want to do an intensive, you've got to do the intensive preparation course. And if you want to do Jukai, you have to do this set of things. And if you want to do ordination, you have to do that set of things. And so people come and they sort of set their goal and they go and do that. And I think that the way that we've set it up is really wonderful, because I think a lot of people, more and more in our culture, really hunger for a place and a community and a relationship with that community, and knowing where they are in time and space and in relationship. And when we really, when we continue to live in a system that's constantly in flux, and we never have that, we're never given that. Maybe in our family of origin, we're never acknowledged, or we're never given a place. Or maybe in even the families that we build, the position of father or mother or friend or buddy or whatever, it's always sort of in flux. And so sometimes we still, even when we build our own family, we never really know our position or have our position sort of affirmed. And as a result, when we don't have that, it's really easy to get trapped into seeking it, looking for it in different places, looking for love in all the wrong places, just trying to find that sense of place. And so what I really love about the structure or the ceremony and the ritual and the tradition of Jukai or eldership or ordination is that it kind of it does it in like this very serious kind of way. It's like, we have this special day and everyone comes together, and then we all chant together and the whole community is witnessing it. And I say, do you want to do this? And will you accept the responsibility for that? And will you vow to do this? And you say in a great strong voice, yes, yes, yes. And then I say, okay, well, now you're like born anew and we're going to give you a new name and this is who you're going to be and this is your role in our community. You say, yes, yes, yes. And then, so it's like a big friggin' check. Your whole seeking for place and community, I check the shit out of that box for you. That's my job as the abbot. Just wow! And then you have a party and you're like, yeah, finally, we've crossed that off our list. And then the next day, it's like one of my, this is going to sound terrible, one of my favorite movies is Conan the Barbarian. And in Conan the Barbarian, right at the beginning, his family is killed and he goes on this great quest. And it's his whole life. He starts as this kid and he's a slave and they strap him to this wheel and he goes through all this terrible stuff in his life. And he's totally bent on killing the guy that killed his parents. And at the end he does. He chops his head off in this really gory scene and throws it. It's a horrible, horrible scene. But my favorite scene in the whole movie is right at the end, where he's sitting on the stairs of the temple after he's like cut off the cult leader's head and all the crowds have seen the emptiness and they've all dispersed. And he's sitting there going like, I was completely bent on this for my whole life. Now what? And it's this vacuousness, this like, now what? And I think that for many people, when they're bent like that, when we're really sort of motivated towards that sort of affirmation, once that is taken off the table to some degree, there's this, okay, so now I've got a name and now I've got a position and now I've got sort of like, I understand the place and relationship where I am. Well, who am I though? And so what can happen is we put our idea that there's going to be this sense of fulfillment and lasting satisfaction and sort of like completion or a resting point when we have this thing. It's like this, intangible thing. And then when we accomplish that, that sense of fulfillment, we might even have it. But it lasts for about 8 seconds. And then we're left with the question, and the sort of grand illusion sort of has a hole popped in the balloon where it's like, oh, I thought this was really going to stop this desiring, or this, I would know, the external person would tell me, the circumstance, the relationship, the environment would tell me who I am. And when we have this ceremony, it's really wonderful, because oftentimes, just like marriage is very similar. It's like a lot of people look at marriage, the ceremony, to be married, as a finish line, I think, before they get there. It's like, I've got this great partner, and we've been together for a while, and we want to affirm our commitment to one another, and really and it's this huge amount of work to get the families together and to have a ceremony and all this kind of stuff. And you tend to look at it as a finish line, I think, coming at it. And then after you're married, you realize to your horror that it's actually the start line. It's like, okay, so we've taken a bunch of concerns and worries off of the table. Who am I going to have a relationship with? And, how are we going to live? And all this kind of stuff gets sort of that, your early life is all sort of geared towards, and society sort of structures it towards, and then you sort of cross this line, go, yeah, and you go, shit, I'm in this totally other race now. Like I'm in a new race, and I just crossed the finish line was the start line, and here I am doing this other thing, and now who am I? Who are we? And what are we? What are we doing here? What's this about? And so this case, I want to talk about the case, but I realize that we've got 2 new people to intensive practice who are also relatively new to Zen as well. And some of you may not know the story of Huineng, so I have to sort of back up to talk about what's going on with Huineng. It's one of the most sort of pivotal stories to the Zen tradition, the development of the Zen tradition. And so I can't just sort of take this chapter from sort of midway through the story and pull it out and say, get it? You get it? Because you don't. It's impossible. So Huineng was now, historically, there is a huge amount of doubt about the stories about Huineng, because of his teaching and because of the sort of politics that went down in the Zen school around just after the time of Huineng. There's a lot of maybe this happened, maybe some of it didn't, maybe, it's the disciples of one teacher sort of like puffing up his story to sort of overcome the students of another teacher. When I first learned about this story, Huineng's, the Platform Sutra of Huineng and the whole story of Huineng, I was early in practice, and I thought the whole thing completely absurd. I'll talk about the story a little bit. So Huineng, the story goes, was originally an illiterate wood seller. So he would go out into the forest and he would gather up firewood, and then he would go to the village where he would sell the firewood to people who needed firewood. And he was doing this because his father had died, and he was making money the best way he could, even though he was uneducated and illiterate, in order to support his mother, his aging mother. And the story is that one day he was in the village and he was selling firewood, and he heard another person, like over on the other side of a stall, reciting a part of the Diamond Sutra. And the legend is that it was the line in which the Buddha says, "Give rise to the mind which rests on nothing whatever." And the story is that like a razor, this sort of single line just sort of like shattered Huineng, and he had this powerful awakening experience, dropped the firewood and was like, "What the heck was that?" And so he went over and asked this guy, said, "Where did you hear this? And who's your teacher?" And so the monk said, "Well, my teacher is Hongzhen, the fifth patriarch." This is in China, fifth patriarch. And Huineng says, "Well, where is he?" And he says, "He's at Huangmei," which is, the story goes, which is nearly 1,000 miles away in the north. The story is a little bit dodgy because it says that Huineng, somebody offered to support his mother so that he was able to leave, because he was this experience that he had, or this insight that he had as a result of this single line, "Give rise to the mind that rests on nothing whatever," so lit a fire under him that he was like, "I've got to go and find out more about this, and it doesn't matter that it's 1,000 miles away, I'm going." And so off he goes, this illiterate, long-haired, bearded, dirty old woodcutter from the south. So the story is that he arrives there eventually at the mountain. I'm just going to pull out, this is Robert Aitken's translation of the Gateless Barrier. He has parts of this. And so one of the days where there's a public talk given by the teacher Hongzhen, Huineng shows up. And it's said that basically, there is a question period and people can ask questions just like we do on Tuesday night. And so Huineng sort of steps up in front of Hongzhen. And Hongzhen asks him, "Where are you from that you come to this mountain making obeisance to me? What is it that you seek here?" Huineng said, "I come from Lingnan in the south. I have come this long distance seeking no particular thing, only the Buddha Dharma." Hongzhen said, "If you're from Lingnan, then you're a barbarian." Well, another translation that I've heard of this is, "You're a jungle rat, you jungle rat." Very sort of like, he just comes at him like, and you can imagine, this is in China. They've got robes, it's very organized, and this sort of, smelly old woodcutter comes in. "If you're from Lingnan, you're a barbarian. How can you become a Buddha?" Huineng said, "Though people from the north and the south are different, there is no north or south in the Dharma or in Buddha nature. Though my barbarian's body and your body are not the same, what difference is there in our Buddha nature?" So Hongzhen, I've talked many times about these kinds of particularly initial interactions where the teacher throws something out and the student completely misses it and the teacher sort of goes at them. So this is a case where the teacher picks on the obvious and the student strikes from the unknown. Now, what's interesting is that it said that Hongzhen saw this, and in the context of where he was, recognized what was going on with this student, recognized the insight that was going on, but also, and actually the story goes, and recognized that this homeless guy basically had just walked in and his insight was beyond all of his students. And kind of went, "Oh shit, this could be bad. So he kind of pretended that it was like, oh, that was kind of cute, and said, well, you can stay here at the monastery. He wasn't a monk, he was just a layperson. So he said, well, you can stay here. And the way that it worked at those monasteries was that there was a lay community that would come and do work at the monastery to help support the monks. The monastery often had property donated to it by the emperor or just by the community that they farmed and worked, and oftentimes the lay people would come and do some of the work at the monastery. So they gave him a job. He gave him a job in the rice pounding building. So the Huineng was a rice pounder. So that way he could come and listen to the talks, and he could be at the monastery. He could have interaction with Hengzhen, the teacher, but it was kind of covert. Because apparently the atmosphere in his monastery was one of competition in a lot of ways. He was becoming an older teacher, and he hadn't, at this point, all of the patriarchs, all of the people who had been named successors were one after the other. They would have one successor, and that person would become the next patriarch, and so there was a lot of pressure. And there was a leader in the community named Shen, I can never get his name right. Shen Su was his name. And everybody looked up to him, and he was really insightful and skillful and beautiful in the form and assiduous in his studies, and everyone sort of was like, he's the guy. But in spite of all of this, it seems that he, according to the disciples of the later disciples of Huineng, he was really concerned with succession. He really wanted to be the successor, and he was sort of pursuing that. But it's also said that he recognized his own shortcomings. He doubted his own insight. And so the story goes that the pressure in the temple started to increase, and everyone was expecting Hengzhen to name a successor. And so Hengzhen said, well, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I want to have a poetry contest. And I want all of the monks to write a poem that expresses their deepest understanding. And whoever demonstrates the clearest understanding will become the sixth patriarch and will become my successor. And so all of the monks in the monastery apparently really felt like Shen Su's got this. It's not even any point in writing a poem because he's going to write the best poem and he's the one that should be the successor. And Shen Su knew that sort of everyone was thinking that way, but still he wasn't confident that he actually had it together. He wasn't confident that what he wrote would be good enough. And so he figured, this is what I'll do. I'll go. They had just had a wall sort of repaired in the temple, and it was all freshly covered, and it was, freshly painted. He said, I'm going to go, and I'm going to, at night, and I'm going to write my verse on the wall, anonymously. And then if the abbot Hengzhen approves of it, then I'll step forward and say it's mine. And if he says it's no good, then no one will be the wiser. So he goes, and in the middle of the night, and he goes and he writes this verse, and it says, "The body is the Bodhi tree." This is a translation, obviously. It was in Chinese originally. "The body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror. Moment by moment, wipe the mirror carefully. Let there be no dust upon it." And this really speaks to Shensu's assiduous nature and real commitment to disciplined, continuous deepening and practice. And so in the morning, the word travels around the monastery, and Hongzhen hears that somebody's written something on his nice new wall. So comes down and he reads the poem. And immediately it said he reads the poem and he kind of sees what's going on, and he sees the capacity of Shensu, and he sees the sort of political intrigue that's kind of going on. And so he says, this is a wonderful verse. This is really a fantastic teaching, and everybody should commit this to memory, and everybody should try their best to live up to this. And it said that he offered incense and he did prostrations to this verse and all this kind of stuff. And Shensu steps forward and says, well, yeah, it was me. And Hongzhen says, oh, wonderful, come to my the Sanzen room this evening, the abbot's chambers this evening. And so he does, and in that interaction, Hongzhen basically says, it's great, but it doesn't really cut it. So everyone hears about this poem and how the abbot thought it was really wonderful, and word continues to travel around the monastery, and people are committing it to memory, and they're reciting, oh, did you hear the wonderful poem that Shensu wrote? And they're reciting it and all this stuff. And eventually it comes down to the rice pounding shed where Huineng is. And someone tells it, says, oh, you heard the poem? And they recite it to him, and he also hears it and thinks, well, that's not quite it, is it? He doesn't say anything, but he said, Hongzhen thought that was good. Huh, interesting. He said, I would like to go and pay my respects. So he asks another fellow I would like to go and pay my respects tonight. Would you come and do this with me? So he says, sure, I'll show you where it is. So that night they go out, and Huineng says, I have a verse that I would like you to put on, but I need you to do it because I can't write. So he dictates this verse, and the other guy writes it on the wall just below. And it says, so the first one says, I'll read the first one again. It says, the body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a clear mirror. Moment by moment, wipe the mirror carefully. Let there be no dust upon it. So Huineng's verse is, Bodhi really has no tree. The mirror too has no stand. From the beginning there is nothing at all. So where can any dust alight? And so they toddle off in the nighttime, and the morning comes, and people walk by, and everyone's amazed by this, and word travels around the monastery. Someone else has written a poem, and they're all really curious about who it is and what the abbot will think. And so he comes down and looks at this poem, and it said he knows right away who wrote it. And he looks around and takes his sleeve and goes, there's nothing to this after all, and rubs it away and goes off to his room, and later on in the day sends a message to Huineng to come to his chambers that evening. So under cover of night, Huineng shows up, and Hongzhen says, Houston, we have a problem. So it said that Huineng came there and asked him about this line in the Diamond Sutra, and for several hours Hongzhen taught him the Diamond Sutra, during which time Huineng's Dharma eye opened more and more and more, to the point where Hongzhen said, you're the guy, you're the next successor. And at that time, the tradition was still, the legend is that the ancestors, the patriarchs, were handing off the robe and bowl of the Buddha, literally, like it was the Buddha's robe and bowl that had been handed down from generation to generation. Historians say bollocks. It's not really that important anyway. But this is sort of the transmission that takes place. Hongzhen says, here's the robe and here's the bowl, and you're now the sixth patriarch, but you can't stay here. You've got to leave, because if you stay here, these monks are going to kill you. And when I read that the first time, I thought, that's insane! They're monks, they're Buddhists, they're, committed to nonviolence, and they're vegetarians, and they're peaceniks, and all this kind of stuff. There's no monks that would have ill will, or be so politically caught up, or so sort of self-centered and focused on their own sort of, well, later on I realized that it's highly likely, totally believable. Human beings, all of them. So the story is that Hongzhen took Huineng down the river, or down the mountain, and got on a boat with him, and rowed him across to the other side of the river or the lake, put him out on the other side, and then came back to the monastery. And the next day, during Teisho, told everybody what had happened in the night. At which point there was an explosion in the monastery, and several of the monks went after him to kill him, or they felt that, who was this guy? He's not even a monk, and he just showed up and he bamboozles the old man. They were probably like, he's not complete. They took advantage of him, and he was a shyster. He was a shifty. He's from the south. He's a jungle rat, and so they went after him. And there's the story in the record is really it's quite brief. They say they went after him and they pursued him through all these kinds of things. But I also read that in China there's all these landmarks associated with his flight. There's one where a bunch of the followers of Hongzhen sort of cornered him on a mountain, and they lit the mountain on fire to try and burn him, and there's like a hollow in the rock where he hid out, and it's like a landmark. You go to see this holy place where Huineng got away from the fire when they were trying to kill him. Amazing. So this is where the case comes up, where Ming, who was the shika at the monastery, and apparently the story is that before he became a monk, he was a general. He was a military general. And so he was a well-developed killer, and disciplined and determined, and completely in pursuit of his quarry. And he comes across the top of this mountain and sees there's Huineng, the illiterate log cutter. So not even log cutter. People use this term log cutter, or a wood cutter. But the actual sort of story is he didn't even have the skill to cut it. He went into the woods and collected dead windfall and sold that, right? So this general, and Huineng looks over his shoulder and goes, "Whoa!" Stops, and he puts the robe and the bowl, which is what these people are coming for, because they feel like he's a thief in the night and he's unworthy, and he puts them on a rock. And this is where the case comes in, and he says, so sixth ancestor was pursued by Ming, the head monk, for as far as Daiyu Peak. The teacher, seeing Ming coming, laid the robe and bowl on a rock and said, "This robe represents the Dharma. There should be no fighting over it. So you may take it back with you." Take it. Ming tried to lift it up, but it was as immovable as a mountain. Shivering and trembling, he said, "I came for the Dharma." And I think this is something that Hongzhen said to Huineng the night that he came to his chambers. He says, "Are you here for the robe, or are you here for the Dharma?" And Huineng says, "I have no interest in a robe. I'm here for the Dharma." And so Hongzhen is like, okay, well, let's talk about the Diamond Sutra. So I think that in this point, and I think that for many people, it's at this point where the thing that you're most seeking, it actually it's within your grasp. It's whether it's a marriage or whether it's a job or whether it's a dharma robe or a dharma name, and you exert yourself to sort of get to the finish line, quote unquote. And it's at the moment where actually it sort of lies right within your reach. And this is, I think where people get left at the altar. People bail at the last minute because they see all of this work going for this goal, and then there's this sort of pause where there it is, and you ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's this all about? And you realize that next step is a doozy. And do you really want to take it? So Huineng just turns around and says, here, there you go. In my own experience, particularly in the Rinzai-ji tradition, there wasn't a lot of this going on. In fact, it was always like the gingerbread man. Sasaki Roshi was like the ultimate gingerbread man. Run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. And it would be like, this is what you need to do to do that. And it in some ways for me, it was a very powerful teacher because I watched myself tripping over myself and trying to step over other people in pursuit of, the robe or the title or whatever. And then at some point it was like, for me it was in a conflict that arose in which I was basically given a choice of I can either stay on side and keep pursuing, or I can actually respond or embody the original face. And those two things parted quite distinctly for me. And when they parted, what I realized was how bent or how committed to the side of pursuit I'd been. And it goes back way before Zen. It goes to my childhood and, pursuit of approval of my father and wanting to be this and wanting to be that. And it was something that throughout my life I had been shackled to and twisted by and dragged out in the pursuit of. And it was then that I kind of went, oh shit, you can do that. You can pursue the robe and bowl, and you can do that ceaselessly. And there are innumerable robes and innumerable bowls of more and more beauty and intensity and glory in a never-ending path that goes on until you drop dead and you'll never have enough robes or enough bowls. And there's another path, which is the realization or the embodiment or the awakening to what Huineng calls your original face. And the realization of this path is to recognize that already, it's manifest. It's hidden to us. When we're chasing after stuff, when we're worried about this and that, when we are committed to the world of subject and object, the world of our original face is cut off to us. We can't see it. So Huineng says to him, so he tries to lift up this robe and bowl. And it says, the koan says that it was immovable as a mountain. It's all like Zen miracles, eh? Always when we're looking at these texts, we have to look at them not, I hope, oh boy do I hope that you don't look at the Muman Khan and think that these are to be taken literally, literal stories. What does this mean that the robe and bowl was immovable to Ming? Shivering and trembling, he said, I came for the Dharma. And I think this is a realization that Ming has himself. He's exerted himself in the pursuit, and there it is. And arriving there, he recognizes, it's like, you're not worthy of that robe and bowl. You're not worthy of that robe and bowl. You're not worthy of that robe and bowl. He says, fine, you take it, worthy one. And Ming knows, I can't lift that. I can't bear that weight. It's not for me. And he realizes it's not the robe that he's chasing. Just as Huineng has said, this robe represents the Dharma. I came for the Dharma, not for the robe. I beg you, lay brother, please open the way for me. Now, even the language here indicates that there's this huge hierarchy between, particularly in China at this time, between lay people and ordained people. And there's still a huge rift in China, but also in North America. I think it's very subtle here, much more subtle. It's not very subtle. It's much more subtle here, I think. But there's always going to be, I think, a difference or I don't know how to express it properly. The teacher said, don't think good, don't think evil. Maybe don't think ordained and don't think lay. Don't think, at this very moment, what is the original face of Ming the head monk? At this very moment, what is your original face? Beyond this robe and bowl and beyond this pursuit and beyond this you and me, who are you? In that instant, Ming had a great awakening. Sweat ran from his entire body. In tears, he made his bows, saying, beside these secret words and secret meanings. So did he say anything really, like, give him a magical formula that just reveals? He didn't. Is there anything of further significance? I love this. Besides the secret words and secret meanings, is there anything of further significance? When we have realizations, this is often how it feels, is like there's this sort of a sensation of getting a peek behind the curtain almost, like it's, but it's like the curtain was never there. I often, people expect to have realization or awakening experience that are like suddenly this whole new thing arrives that I never knew existed or was never exposed to me. But in reality, what I've seen is that the experience of realization is that, holy shit, this was in front of me the whole time, and I was like not even looking at it. I couldn't see it, but there it is. A flower, a simple flower, transforms from being a two-dimensional object to being a spherical part of the whole. And you feel like you say, do you see that? When you look at are you seeing that? And someone goes, huh? Besides these secret words and secret meanings, is there anything of further significance? The teacher said, what I have just conveyed to you is not secret. If you reflect on your own face, your own original face, your origin, whatever is secret will be right there with you. Ming said, though I practiced at Huangmei with the assembly, I could not truly realize my original face. Now, thanks to your appointed instruction, I am like someone who drinks water and knows for himself whether it is cold or warm. Lay brother, you're now my teacher. Though I practice at Huineng, so in the old days, a teacher, their Osho name, their teacher's name, was usually related to the place that they taught, and it was usually a mountain. So Hongzhen is his monk's name. And when he set up to teach, he set up at a place called Huangmei Mountain. And so in the Zen tradition, when you say Huangmei, it can both refer to the mountain as well as the person. And generally, mountain is a word that refers to a temple, like any temple. So often in Japan, for example, temples will have Zan in the name, mountain. And like Daibai-zan, Chobo-zenji in Seattle is a Great Plum Mountain. It's not a mountain. It is a mountain. We have this final instruction. It says, all of you who have come into the Zendo. That's a total liberal translation, and it's actually all of you who have come into this mountain, is what it says. Anyways, actually, when I became an Osho with Genjo, when you become an Osho, you have some influence on the name that you get. And I wanted to really respect this tradition, and so the name that I chose is Kosen, which means ko is red, and sen is the character. It means hermit, but the character is made up of two ideograms. One is a mountain and person. So it's red hermit or red wizard is the other. Sen is wizard. But red mountain person. And so this hill just up here is called Red Flag Mountain. And so I wanted to respect this old tradition. Anyways. Now, thanks to your pointed instruction, I am like someone who drinks water and knows for himself whether it is cold or warm. This is an important point in our practice. I've had the good fortune in practice to give a lot of Dharma talks and to lead many sesshins. And I've had the wonderful experience of meeting people in interview. Sometimes people tell me I talk too much, too long, or repeat myself too much. And occasionally people will come into the interview room and say, repeat something that I've said or refer to something that I've said, and they say, you've said this so many times, but I never really heard it until I saw it for myself. And then I think, oh my God, he's been telling me this for years, and only now do I grasp it. And I think we've all had this experience one way or another where it finally tweaks. Someone's telling us something, describing something, explaining how to do something, and when we grok it for ourselves completely, right, then the sort of confusion around the individual description or the sort of metaphors that a person was using or the concept of it, it's like in an instant they disappear. So this is a reference to another teaching talking about if I have a cup of tea, I can sit here and drink it. You're sitting here watching me drink it, and I'm drinking it. I can describe it. And I can describe it like a sommelier, and oh, it's got woodiness and floral hints and dark cherry bits, and it's semi-warm and all that kind of stuff. And no matter how accurate my description is, you don't know the first thing about it. And it's not until I can cut all of that away and just hand you a cup of the same tea, and then I don't have to say anything. You know it for yourself. And this is what he's saying. He's like, I've been sitting here listening to all this stuff at Huineng Mountain and practicing with all these people and estimating the temperature of the Dharma water. And for the first time, I've actually stuck my own hand in it. I've had a drink of it myself, and I know it for myself. And he says, oh, thank you, you're my teacher. And even then, Huineng says, if you can say that, then let's both call Huangmei our teacher, Hongzhen. Maintain your realization carefully. The story is that when Hongzhen transmitted to Huineng, he said, like, your Dharma eye is open. You can see this, you realize this, and I'm transmitting to you. But you need to go and temper this. You need to go and cultivate this for some time before coming out as a teacher. That's the story. The story is that he went off into the woods and worked as a cook for a hunting camp. And there's some great stories about that. And actually, this is case 23. If we go to case 29, which is Huineng's not the wind, not the flag. We'll get there. This is the case in which Huineng kind of crawls out of the bushes after spending several years sitting and developing his teaching, and shows up at a monastery to sort of plant his teacher's flag, so to speak. Maintain your realization carefully. So in a lot of ways, what he's saying here, the monk, Ming, says, you're my teacher. And he says, if you can say that, then let's both call Huangmei our teacher. Maintain your realization carefully. He says goodbye. He says, go back to Hongzhen. I'm going this way. And gives the same advice that he received. You've had your awakening, now go and cultivate it. Cultivate it. Wumen says, it must be said that the sixth ancestor forgets himself completely in taking action here. So both Wumen's classic sort of insulty compliment, completely forgets himself. Sounds like a bad thing, but completely forgets himself, his own separate motivations and concerns. He's like a kindly grandmother who peels a fresh lychee, removes the seed, and puts it into your mouth. Then you only need to swallow it down. He makes it so easy. Wumen's verse says, it can't be described, it can't be pictured, it can't be praised enough. Stop groping for it. The original face has nowhere to hide. When the world is destroyed, it is not destroyed. Okay, thank you all for putting up with my long-winded storytelling. Take care of yourselves today. It's really hot, and drink lots of water. As they used to say, pee clear. That's always a good tone.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.